Hello, everybody, on what has been a very interesting and busy day for the sim racing community and for GT Planet. Assetto Corsa EVO launched in early access today, and we've had a chance to try it. Everybody in our community, of course, has been trying it, and wanted to get together and talk about our impressions and what we think about it so far. It's a little rough around the edges. Chaz, I think you were probably the first to jump in to make some video content for us today. What were your initial initial reactions and initial impressions to this?
The very first seconds I jumped in were brilliant. You know, the music, and I said it in the video as well, which will obviously be on the channel probably by this point anyway, that everyone's seeing this. When, there's been so much hype and so much build up around this, there's been such a long time since the first Assetto Corsa game, and, that's come on leaps and bounds since then. The music that comes on, even when the game is just first loading with all the copyright stuff and all the usual gibber that you get beforehand, it's just epic in the way that it builds up. It really seizes the moment to sort of be like, we know how grand this is. We know what you've been waiting for. The music fits perfectly. And then it goes downhill massively as soon as you start playing the game. I was very disappointed, actually. And a lot of people that have watched the previous podcast will know I was massively skeptical. I went into it with as open a mind as I could, and I just wasn't captivated, unfortunately. I know it's very early access, and I understand that, but I didn't see anything of promise yet that makes any difference to me than staying with a Assetto Corsa that I already have, that's modded to death and made as good as I want it to. So, I don't know. Not a great first impression, I must say.
Yeah, I think Assetto Corsa, the original, is its biggest competition for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
It's been a while since I've played Assetto Corsa. I probably should have done that in preparation for Evo, but I do remember it, and I know how far it has come with all of the mods and all of the mod scenes. But I agree with you. The presentation, I think Kunos does a good job with the music selection,
Mm-hmm.
the presentation, and all that. Unfortunately for me, the game does not run very well on my hardware, and I know you've had some issues on that end as well. It's a little bit. It's a little rough around the edges
Yeah.
for me. I don't know if it's the game that needs optimization, or if it's my hardware. It's time for some upgrades, which I know it is, but I was hoping for something a little better than what I'm seeing right now.
Well, I mean, even my PC, my graphics card is an RTX 2070. It's literally noted on the recommended settings. I ran it on medium for a little bit, and with the anti-aliasing and stuff turned up, and that was the main turn-off for me, was anti-aliasing. When you look at the car in the showroom, and it's great that they've got all these reflections and stuff in, and so many light sources, and it's beautiful how they've done that. But the way in which it's translated to you as a viewer is just pixely mess. If you've got a really thin line down the side of the car, you see it just phasing across, literally, even with VSync on, you can see your refresh rate through this reflection. It's just not pretty at all, unfortunately, like that, and literally rough around the literal edges. When you're trying to focus on the circuit quite far ahead of you as well, I did a few laps at Suzuka West, and coming into the Casio Triangle at the end of the lap, you've got the Ferris wheel, you've got a lot of grandstands, a lot of buildings. It looked like TV static. It was just very messy off in the distance, and it's a humongous shame because when it's up close, it's pretty, but as soon as there's a rough edge that it has to compress into 2 pixels, it doesn't anti-alias well at all.
Yeah, one thing I noticed is that when it has the chance, like if you turn the settings up, obviously you pay the price in frame rate, but it does look like it's a really pretty game at times. I think the car models look really well done. The paint and the texture of the cars also caught my eye when it's running in 4K and everything is turned up. I thought the cars actually looked really, really good. I'll even say look very Polyphony Digital, Gran Turismo 7-esque at times. So I think they've done a good job in that department on the cars. But I think it's early access too. That's something that we gotta
we have
keep
to
in
remember.
mind. This is I don't want to be too harsh or too critical on the game, and this is certainly not a review by any measure. It's just more of a discussion. about the state that the game is in right now. But there's definitely a lot of optimizations to be had. And Andrew, I mean, you've looked at the game a lot in the content that we've published, and the screenshots, of course, show what I think should be eventually a very pretty game.
Yeah, I mean, I've not really had the chance to play it myself at all because my PC's built for comfort more than speed. I don't think I could play it in more than about 480p at 24 FPS. But yeah, no, it's well, I mean, we've seen a mixture of opinions, I think, on the forum so far that I think mirror your opinions. That it can look great, but a lot of people are having a lot of trouble kind of getting their rig to the point where they want to show it. But it is the first of 6 early access builds that are promised on the roadmap. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, as well as the new features, and there's going to be some updates to their support for VR and for triple screens. I think we're going to be seeing more optimization along the way. But yeah, I haven't really had a chance to clap eyes on it myself properly yet.
Chaz, did you get to play at night at all, or in the changing weather conditions?
I went in the rain, but not at night. I've seen from the screenshots and bits of video that I have seen, though, the night racing, much like it was on Assetto Corsa Competizione, because it definitely takes a few elements from that as well. They've sort of combined a bit of best of both worlds. The night racing and everything, the way that headlights project onto cars, especially right in front of you, looks incredible, but I haven't witnessed that for myself yet. I think that a lot of what we've seen, like you said, with some of the screenshots and things before, when I was in the game, just harking back quickly to what you mentioned about car textures, I thought they all looked really matte. They didn't look actually glossy, or you couldn't see fleck in the paint, for example, like we'd seen in the screenshots. And I think it's maybe a bit similar to the sort of early days of scapes on Gran Turismo, where in the right setting, where the game knows what it can do, and you put it in its own little corner, you will get the most incredible looking graphics. But in situ, when you're forcing it to do 12 cars in a race in crazy conditions, and it's all got to be moving and all dynamic, it can't keep up like that all the time. I think that they've done a good thing in providing this roadmap, because it sort of covers their own backsides from the get-go, doesn't it? Just to be like, look, remember, this is early access.
Yeah, and I think it's you're right too about the textures and the particle effects and stuff, because there was one scene that I was looking at of the cars there, and there were multiple cars, and they were like in the pit lane kind of, and I thought, oh, they've got a matte paint, they have a matte paint job, but then I was looking on the rear, on like the back bumper and the boot, I think, as both of you
you're learning.
Refer to it as the boot, it was shiny and it looked beautiful, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, okay, that's a little bug. So yeah, it's definitely inconsistent, I think, is probably the best word to use for it right now, but it shows promise. I think if they can get these optimizations out, with the early access stuff, it's kind of, I know everybody has a lot of opinions on that, but I think it's actually kind of interesting to see games in this state, because it helps you realize just how difficult it must be to build something like this and all of the work that goes into it. When you just see a perfectly shiny finished product at the end of years and years of development work, you just take a lot of it for granted. And I mean, I see a lot of that in software development myself, not in game development, but so much work goes into these things behind the scenes, and most people never get to see these intermediary steps. But when you see something that doesn't have all that polish and doesn't have all of the I's dotted and the T's crossed, it sort of makes you appreciate that. But of course, on the flip side, this is a product that people are paying for, and you do want to have a certain level of quality. But I know Kunos is going to get a lot of feedback off of this, and ultimately it may help them find more bugs and things like that and move faster overall, hopefully.
It does still look and play better than Solar Crown, and that was a full release candidate.
Yeah, but to be honest, Andrew, I think the original Mario Brothers still has better graphics than Solar Crown, to be honest with you. It's not a hard competition. But no, but you're right. It's it's a paid product still, despite being in early access, so there has to be a level of polish to it. I think I saw that it had been reported there was actually a bug, because one of my main things that I took from the video is they promised a certain amount of cars, and I couldn't find that many cars. Even if you just had single models, we were like 16 cars down. Apparently, there was a bug that stops you buying your first car, which then unlocks the fact that you have a sort of driving academy and other bits to do. And yeah, a lot of the cars weren't actually even there. So it's been a rough launch as well, let alone the fact that people are finding the game to be not that brilliant.
Yeah, I've only been able to play the game in offline mode so far. Every time I've jumped on it, it always pops up that message. So there are a lot of aspects of the game that we haven't been able to play yet. They're just not available to us.
That actually does pose the question of whether the game is going to require online.
True.
Which is something we kind of half speculated a few articles ago, because there was, I don't know whether it was kind of a lost in translation moment or whether it was implied that online might be needed. So a lot of people have obviously taken this, I've only got 5 cars and now they've enabled it so there's 20 in offline mode. Will we need online? So I think that's a question that's going to be hot on everyone's lips over the next few months.
Yeah. It appears to be the case at the present moment. Obviously, that was a hot issue with GT7, and of course, we all remember that one update. Which update was that, Andrew? I'm sure you remember the number.
I have deliberately forgotten which update that was. But it was 1.07.
Yeah, that was. Those were fun times. But anyway, that's another subject. But this will certainly be a hot topic. I'm assuming with most PC racers. They will PC gamers. They will have online connectivity, so it won't be as much of an issue for them, because I know many PC games do require internet connections these days. But we'll have to see. Moving on to sounds. So this one, I don't know. For me, I thought that some of the cars sounded better than others. Mm-hmm. But they do seem, the engine note has a bit of a gamey tone to it, for lack of a better word.
Glad that you said that. It sounds like I drove the S2000 and I described it as, it sounds like a third party has modded it and just not been able to record the sound very well or not map it very well. They all sounded very digital. Like you could tell it was a digital sound. It was almost like, if you went up through the revs, for every 100 revs, you had a different note on a keyboard, and it just wasn't smooth. And then there's the fact that the sounds are so inconsistent. I mean, as soon as you go near a wall or under a bridge, flipping heck, turn your headset down. Because, I mean, even with the windows up, I drove the RS Cosworth at Brands Hatch. As soon as I went past the pit wall, and it was obviously echoing the sound off the wall next to me, it was double the volume, even with the windows up, and it sounded like there was a speaker literally in the back of the car playing the sound at me again. It was just so inconsistent. And the tires are really loud over the top. That's the only thing I turned down. What was the other thing I mentioned? Oh yeah, I drove the i30N. You two know I'm obsessed with the i30N. Borrowed a few in my time. Absolutely worship them. Really want one. First car I drove, and it sounded like sometimes when it was backfiring, when you're on the throttle and just lifting off a little bit, there's that little crackle that it does. It sounded like it was outside and it was over there, and it was like, behind me in the background. And that's great, because that's exactly where it should be. But then other times, when you're really driving it in anger, it sounded like someone had let a firecracker off in the passenger seat next to me, and it was like the backfire was in the car. It just seemed like the location of the sounds, what was deadened, sort of muffled and so on, and what wasn't, was really inconsistent.
Yeah. The anytime I would drive down straightaway, like the main straight where you've got the you got concrete barriers on either side, and where there would be like an echo. You can tell that's what it's trying to simulate. It's trying to simulate this reverberation of the engine note off of these surfaces, but it felt very binary, or it sounded binary. It's like, you just drive. It's like, okay, I'm next to a wall. Like, let's play the echo, and it's very loud and unnatural. I think I only played, of course, in the cockpit view from the driver's seat. Is that the only view on there? I didn't check the button.
No. There is. If you press F1, it cycles through the sort of driving cameras, and then I think F2 is like externals. That's
something I'll have to revisit for sure. But I just played in the first-person view from behind the steering wheel. So, but I'm like, these are production cars. You wouldn't have that sound coming through into the interior like that. So
Yeah.
Even if it was an exterior camera view, I still think it would be a little bit jarring and a little bit too much. I mean, that's a cool effect and all,
Yeah.
but it just needs to be scaled down a little bit, and maybe ramped up also would make it a bit more natural. Yeah, it's very, very, very distracting, I think. But
it scared the life out of me. I think one of the weirdest bits actually was I was driving at Suzuka West, where you start in the old pit lane that goes up towards 130R, and obviously you go over the bridge to go to 130R as well as going under it. Now, the sound effect plays when you go under the bridge because at the end of the day, you're effectively in a tunnel at that point. But when you drive over the bridge as well, it does the same thing, which I found strange.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's because of the barriers are quite close over the bridge, or whether it was just because it was touching the same, vertical piece of tarmac that it would be on when you're under the bridge, and it thought, do the noise, and kicks in.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to driving physics and force feedback. Of course, I was playing with my Fanatec Gran Turismo DD Extreme, which is the DD Plus. Yeah, the Extreme. It's the DD Plus wheelbase and direct drive motor. Out of the box, I found the force feedback settings to be much too strong. Very, very heavy. I still have a lot of work to do in that regard to get something that feels a bit more natural. I did toy with the settings to try to turn that down, and some different, I guess, inherent characteristics started to come through for me. What wheel did you use, Chaz? Were you using the TGT2?
I was on the trusty TGT2, which is quite good actually, considering that one of them is belt driven and one of them is direct drive. But I found them really weak, the force feedback settings.
Really?
Understandably, being on a belt driven wheel, it probably can't put as much force through. But I was doing a Gran Turismo Classic last night. I was doing the 1,000 miles on Gran Turismo 4 and had to, in a Ginetta G4, and had to turn the force feedback down because simply down the straight it was shaking the desk to pieces because it was buffering like mad. And I think I had it on 50% the other night. I turned it up to 75% in Windows, 90% in the game, and I could still, it was very linear. It was either, it was just, if you pushed into a corner, it would just sort of go, okay, and it just put a little bit of weight in. There was no sort of jolt into it, nothing to really make you feel like the car was alive. It was very lazy.
Yeah, I noticed that for me, it felt like I've been thinking all day about how I'm going to describe this. But it feels like the effects that I'm getting through the wheel they're good. I'm getting some road texture, some road undulation. I feel the curbs, the vibration over the rumble strips feels good. That's all good. But it feels like I'm only getting that. Like it's a one-dimensional thing. So I'm only getting that. I'm not getting feedback from what the tires are doing. I don't. And tell me if that doesn't make sense, and I'll try to think about it another way.
You've nailed it. It's like objects trigger it rather than a continued force of what's going on underneath the car.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it. The result of that is that it makes it hard to feel what the car is doing in terms of understeering or oversteering. And as you start to lose traction in the rear wheels, I like to feel that and get a warning through the steering wheel, through the force feedback. And it's just not, there's just nothing there. Visually, you see that the car is starting to oversteer. But that visual cue seems to be the only thing that I'm getting. And it makes it, I was able to sort of figure it out after a couple of laps, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what's happening. So I got used to it, but it just wasn't there for me. I don't know if it's a wheel specific thing, but apparently not.
No, it seemed like it was very lazy to me as well. It didn't do a lot until it did, if that makes sense. Like it was benign. It felt like it was just a centering spring, like a lot of wheels have. Naturally, you turn the wheel. If you're in a menu, you let go, it'll go back to the middle. It felt like that's all it was doing.
Yeah, I noticed as well when I would turn the wheel, I would get more resistance the farther that I turned it. I mean, it felt like it was a clear ramp up it wasn't like a consistent resistance. It like the more I turned it, the harder it got to turn, which was something I wasn't used to feeling.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It felt somewhat. I guess it kind of makes sense, but it felt a little strange because probably because I was not getting that feedback from the wheels. So from the wheels themselves, and so I would turn in and it's like I could feel. I wasn't getting anything from the road, so I could just feel this function output, I guess is what it is. It's just calculating your degree of input, and it's ramping up the resistance. And so, that was sort of a strange thing to me. But braking was something as well that felt a little bit off-putting to me. It's I'm using the pedals, of course, that come with the Fanatec GTDD Extreme, and they have the load cells. And I love driving with load cells, but to me, it felt like I was never getting consistent input on the brakes. And I would go and press the brakes, and it's almost like it's like the tires were grabbing, like almost as if ABS was not on, but that's not really how a car behaves if it doesn't have ABS. It just locks up. But it's like the car was grabbing and then losing grip, and then it just felt really inconsistent. Did you have a similar experience, Chaz?
I did, yeah. I felt like sometimes because I'm using the TGT2 pedals, and you can blow on them from distance, and you're at full braking force. And sometimes I felt that I was being as hesitant as I could and trying to get between that sweet spot of 50 and 75% pressure where you're not locking up, you're nice and smooth onto it. And sometimes I'd be doing that, and the car would stop 100 meters before the corner, and I'd think, oh, I've made an idiot of myself there. Back on the throttle again. And then other times you'd slam on and it would do the same thing. And then other times you do 50% again and it just goes straight on. And all of a sudden you've got nothing. There was times when it would grab, like you say, definitely grabbed. It's like the tires literally just melted into the road and it said, right, I'm stopping. And your face would fall off. You'd stop that hard. And then other times it just, as soon as you had a tiny bit of lock on, it was like a really sort of overreactive ABS system. Just sort of went, nope, I can't brake and turn at the same time. You're going in a wall. And there was just, it was like the game rolls a dice every time you hit the brakes as to what it's going to do now. It was so strange.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you felt the same way, because I thought, I was like, is something wrong with me? Is something wrong with my pedals?
I'm rubbish on the brakes though, naturally, so it's probably I thought it was just me.
Trail braking is nearly impossible with this current.
Well, we play Gran Turismo, and trail braking doesn't exist in Gran Turismo 7. So
yeah, I was watching the input, to the braking, on the braking indicator on the gauges there. And because I was like, is this, what's happening here? Is it, am I giving it inconsistent input? But I wasn't. I was getting inconsistent output from the game. So I don't know what's going on there. Hopefully that's something that they can fix. But I'm glad you're not the only one. I'm glad I'm not the only one to experience that. I did notice a nice difference between the cars themselves and how they handled. I think they've done a really good job of simulating those differences, front wheel drive, mid-engined cars. Like they feel different they feel very different from one another. And I think that's a great sign moving forward with this physics engine.
Yeah, definitely. And Andrew, you'll know that they've included a lot of different cars, haven't they, to sort of give a lot of diversity amongst the earliest selections. So you've always got something, either end of the scale to drive.
Yeah, there's as you say, it's a spectrum from the fairly frantic Abarth 595 up to the Mercedes AMG GT2. I mean, obviously, if you can drive them, because people haven't been able to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they seem to have provided one of pretty much everything on the performance spectrum: front, rear, mid, everything. So it should hopefully give it a good account of what the underlying physics model is like as we wait for the next few updates.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see where they take this, because I think the foundation is good, and I like a lot of things about this game. I know this is coming across as quite negative, but it is early access. I know we're all certainly very much aware of that, and this is something that's going to evolve a lot. I don't think any of these things are not fixable. These are all things that that can be tweaked and modified, and could certainly result in a really nice game. There's some aspects that certainly did remind me of Gran Turismo, like the showroom with the cars, and you can set the lights and turn on the turn signals, and really view the car from a lot of different angles. Gives you a lot of different controls about regarding the time of day and the weather in which you're viewing these cars in these environments. Reminded me a lot of the PSVR 2 VR showroom feature in GT7. Very similar to that, but a lot more features and a lot more settings that you can change. So that's a really positive sign. I think that they might be onto something here. This may be sort of the Gran Turismo title for PC down the road. It's not there now, of course, but I like what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's a good point. Everything that is there, they can work on. It's not stuff that's set in stone. And at the end of the day, we are how many hours since early access came out? It's just gone past 11 o'clock at night here in the UK, and it's mere hours later. And there's still a long old time before it gets its full release. And at the end of the day, a point like this for early access, the reason for it is to get people playing it, to expand finding problems or getting feedback, and it's just expanding the feedback search. Basically, it's one humongous feedback form, all of this, and people are excited for it, so they will pay for it, and you can't blame them for putting a price on it. There are things that I think they probably won't change, which I would like them to, but that's because I'm fussy as all hell. But I don't and never have liked the menus in Assetto Corsa or Assetto Corsa Competizione. They go for this layout where everything's in big squares, but then it's all small text in the middle. So you've got this huge section that says single race. And it's just, I don't know. I struggled for ages to find out how to set the wheel up and make sure the axis and things were set, because that was the only thing that wasn't in a square that looked like you could click it at the top. And when you're changing car or changing track or weather or something, I find it really strange that you have to keep clicking back to then go back to the menu you were in. In my eyes, if you're going to go to a car selection screen, you'd click car or whatever, it would give you your options. You'd click one of them, and that would either lock it in and then take you back to where you were, or you'd click it and then click OK in the bottom corner or something. But you click it and then you go back like 2 or 3 times, like an old license test on Gran Turismo. You go back multiple times to just return to where you were. In my head, something tells me that doesn't lock in my selection, and it's hard to get around that. And I know a lot of people are the same. I did enjoy the particular bing that it makes, though, when you click apply. That's probably the only thing I liked about any of the menus, to be honest. It makes a very nice noise. But yeah, the menus are typically Kunos difficult to navigate, I find.
Yeah, they could do with an accessibility consultant, I think, to help guide them through.
Yes.
If I know there's lots and lots of people in the gaming community who can't necessarily see tiny text or badly contrasted stuff. So I think possibly it would help them a little bit to have somebody on board who could help navigate them through those little foibles of menus.
Yeah. Well, I think what it doesn't get helped by is the fact that the menu takes the whole screen up. I'm on a 27-inch monitor. It's not the biggest monitor in the world. People will play this on a huge, 50-odd inch, 60-odd TV, and when you've got a menu that has these huge boxes just for a small piece of text, it really is hard to figure out where the option ends and where the next one begins and where stuff's laid out. So, yeah, I definitely think that they could do with that. It's just it doesn't feel friendly to use, especially with all the clicking back. That really did trigger me quite a bit, because surely, like I say, you just click something that locks in your choice.
It feels like cancelling rather than accepting.
Yes, 100%. That's absolutely it.
I agree 100%. Yeah, the menus are frustrating. Seems like so many racing games these days, especially PC-minded racing games, they just have really frustrating menus. I think they were so focused on making them look good and pretty, they forgot that they actually need to be usable. And I mean, I think a lot of recent Gran Turismo games are guilty of this as well. It's just like, look, I don't need this part of the game to look really good. I need it to be fast to operate. And like in AC Evo here, the menus are slow for me.
Oh yeah, very.
And they're loading this 3D model of the car in the background, and yeah, it looks really cool. I mean, yeah, it's obvious why you would want it to look like that, but the usability is just not there, and the performance isn't there. And I mean, my PC is not up to snuff, but it's also not as meager as what a lot of people who download this game to try it out will end up using, and they're not going to have a very good experience with that. So yeah, there needs to be a lot more focus in this area, because that's one part of the game that everybody touches and everybody uses is the menus, and you can't overlook that. All game developers, listen to us right now.
We are talking truth.
Thing.
Well, that's the thing, though. It can look as pretty as you want when you're in the race or when you're on track, even on your own. And that is the bit that people will focus on fine-tuning the most to their system, depending on what it's doing. You shouldn't have to expect to fine-tune something because of a menu. You shouldn't have to worry about dialing it back and what frame rate you get and so on. I mean, even in the racing, my PC, like I said before, it meets the recommended specs. It's got like 4 times the amount of RAM that it says you should have. The graphics card is the one listed in the recommended specs. And even then, while recording at the same time, the recording was still running fine at 60 FPS. I was barely getting 60 FPS in the menu. It's so strange how unoptimized it is. And again, when it's loading certain objects in different parts of a track, I was getting like 45 FPS, but the recording itself was not struggling. So it wasn't a sign of the PC necessarily struggling. It's the game itself, like its engine just can't lob everything at you fast enough.
Yeah. And a lot of these optimizations too are probably early access issues,
100%.
Because I'm sure that some of the final stages of game development, a lot of it is probably optimization, because you probably build it to a certain spec, and then you figure out how you can actually get it to work. So we're still in that getting it to work phase right now. Or Kunos is probably still in that getting it to work well. It works, now let's get it to work well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves.
It's the 80-20 principle, isn't it? The first 80% takes 20% of the time, and it's the last 20% that takes the 80% of the time.
Yep. Yeah. It never fails. I'm
going to use that excuse when I edit this.
That's true. Well, closing thoughts, Chaz, do you have a favorite car so far?
i30N Drive-N Limited Edition. Of course, that
was a dumb question.
It's brilliant. To be fair, I did mention in my video that the first 2 cars I've driven are both cars that Tom Brooks has owned, and it seems like, is Tom behind the scenes on this?
He's probably owned pretty much everything in the game at this point.
Tom has owned every car in the world at some point, at least once.
4 months.
Yeah, before his dad found out it was an absolute rock box underneath. But he knows what I'm on about. That Mondeo was hellish. But I don't get me wrong, I enjoyed having something new to play with. I think I was very critical, but I think I let some of my skepticism get in the way, admittedly. I have to make sure that I remind myself it's early access, because part of me kept going for the throat and thinking that it was a fully released game, which is definitely not. This is day 1. There's a long old roadmap ahead. There's a long old roadmap ahead of even the next update. So we need to just be patient with it. I think in the meantime, I'm just going to enjoy falling through the floor and doing minus 2.1 billion kilometers an hour like I did earlier.
Yeah. Try the Lotus Emira. It drives really well in the game.
Couldn't see it in the menu.
Oh.
I'll find it.
Yeah.
The real one is... I love the Emira so much.
Yeah, it drives really well. Well, we will keep an eye on this game, and I know we will be talking about it a lot in the future. So for those of you who have had a chance to drive it and to play with it, leave a note in the comments or head to our forums. There's a lot of talk, and everybody has opinions. It's kind of been across the board so far. I think I've seen people that are really happy with it, and other people that are more disappointed, and people watching the videos and stuff, they're not yet convinced. And it's going to be a long road with this one, but it'll be fun to see how it all comes together. So until next time, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys soon.